My name is Stewart Rogers. I'm with VentureBeat. I'm sometime analyst at VentureBeat, sometime journalist at VentureBeat. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But it's a real super honor to be starting the event today and talking to you about the state of marketing technology. So without further ado, why don't I take you through what I think is going on in marketing technology, and then we'll bring on the rest of our program over the next 2 days, and hopefully you'll have an amazing time. So we're just waiting for my presentation to pop up on the screen because, I could absolutely ad-lib it, but we're not going to do that. That's my face. There's a nice social media tip for you. If you've got an avatar, make it look like you. So let's talk about social media. Let's talk about marketing technology. Let's talk about digital marketing in general. So, of course, marketing technology. I want to talk to you about stop being a magpie. Now, first of all, hands up anybody in here who doesn't know what a magpie is. Excellent, good news. So you know your birds, that's great. And we're going to talk about start being an owl. Having a couple of little problems with the clicker here, so I'm going to ask if someone can forward the slides for me. So my name's Stewart Rogers. You'll find me on Twitter at @TheRealSJR. Twitter, of course, is one of my very favorite social networks. I do an awful lot of tweeting, so do keep up with me on Twitter. And VentureBeat is one of the big technology news websites in the world. We try to make sense of what's going on in technology daily. And within VentureBeat, we have a research arm called VB Insight. And VB Insight is all about research, studies, and analysis. You'll find us on insight.venturebeat.com, and what we focus on, even though you will find some reports on there about video games, because we've got to have some fun sometimes too, you'll find lots and lots of incredible reports, studies, and data on marketing technology. And in fact, we've got a little extra special gift for everybody that is at the event. We're actually going to give you not one, not two, but 3 reports completely free of charge. Actually a $299 value, and we're going to let everybody here, all the attendees, have 3 reports free of charge. And there's a reason for that, and that's because I want you to go deep into some of the things I'm going to talk briefly about today. So let's talk about LCD. Now, when I say LCD, I don't actually mean this kind of LCD, or this kind of LCD. I'm talking about lowest common denominator. And in my life, the lowest common denominator is data. Not this kind of data, but this kind of data. The kind of data where we look at everything in great depth. In fact, in over 25 years of sales and marketing, I have found that the one thing that makes everybody succeed the most is when they have absolute quality attention to the data. Now, at VB Insight, we look at data in 2 different ways. We look at small data. That's where we might survey a whole bunch of people who use the tools that I'm going to talk to you about today. So, for example, for my conversion rate optimization report, I studied 3,000 conversion rate optimization tool users. And then we'll look at big data. Big data for me means scraping the JavaScript from 3.2 million websites to work out what tools people are using on their websites. Or it means grabbing 18 billion ad impressions so we can figure out what's going on in the advertising world. Now, sometimes that small data and that big data lines up, and that tells a nice story. Sometimes the small data and the big data doesn't line up, and guess what? That tells a nice story too. And that's what we do, is we take all of that data and we turn that into a study, and it's completely data-led. So if you do well in one of our reports, you're doing well because the data says so, not because of someone's opinion or because somebody paid to be there. So why marketing technology? Well, it's because we can look at marketing technology and actually tell the story of how we do business in the 21st century. We can tell the story from the perspective of the vendors and their customers. And you'll see lots of animal references in my slides. It's because I like animals, We can also tell the story from the point of view of the marketing team. The CMO is at the back there trying to steer the whitewater raft, because that is, frankly, what marketing feels like sometimes. It's a little bit like being thrown down a river and you're not quite sure where it's going, but you try to steer it and you try to go with the flow. That's the rest of the marketing team, by the way. They are absolutely petrified, which is typical for a marketing team. And we can also tell the story from the point of view of the platform holders, the place where customers are, from advertisers. Of course, don't do this if you're on social media, which is just broadcast about yourself 2,000 times every 5 minutes. That's a really bad idea. It makes kind of a mess here, and it makes much more of a mess on social media too. It also allows us to tell the story from two perspectives. The very top of the funnel, where we talk about demand generation, and all the way through to lead generation. It allows us to tell the story after that. But let's talk about demand gen versus lead gen for just a moment. Demand gen is about creating a buzz for your product or your service. And lead gen is about getting the ball in the back of the net. It's about getting those people to come and be interested in your product and service. Demand gen, therefore, is an art. Demand gen is an art. It's absolutely one of the most difficult things to get right. Whereas lead gen is a science. Lead generation, you're going to hear about growth hacking over the next couple of days. You're going to hear about all sorts of things that get leads straight into your system to follow up. It is a science. It is a process. It's something that can be followed. But the interesting thing is, it's not really a versus. Demand gen actually feeds lead generation. You can't have one without the other. You can't start at the middle of the funnel or the bottom of the funnel and expect to get very far, because really all that's happening is that people are coming to you late in the buying process where you can't actually control what's going on. Lead generation is therefore incredibly easy to count. Very, very easy. Step by step, you can put tracking codes into everything. You can figure out what's going on extremely easily. Demand generation is very hard to measure. Because of that, demand generation techniques generally tend to get a bad rap. They generally tend to get less airtime, and that's because it's very hard to actually give C-level executives and board members real hard facts and numbers in the demand generation space. So let me introduce you to our friend the Magpie. He's going to show up a few times through this presentation. The Magpie is an amazing bird, really. It's pretty well understood that it is an evil bird in terms of history and mythology. It isn't really. It's actually quite a nice little thing. But one of the things magpies are known for are going after shiny new objects. And we're going to talk about shiny new objects and the reason why you don't want to be a magpie. Magpies are also known for quite a famous rhyme. There's one for sorrow, two for joy. I don't know if you've ever heard of that rhyme at all, but we're going to talk about that later as well. And I'm going to introduce the other member of our cast today. That's the owl. This one's a long-eared owl, particularly good at fitting into the standard owl practices of wisdom and prosperity. By the way, owls, long-eared owls especially, are very well known for taking over old magpie nests when the magpies desert them because there's nothing shiny in there anymore. So that's maybe a nice metaphor for what we're going to talk about today. So where are your customers? Well, let's have a look at some of the figures. Facebook, 1.49 billion monthly active users. Of course, Facebook count their monthly active users a little bit differently to everyone else, but that's still an impressive number. Google+, well, they say that they have 2.5 billion users, but that's not really true. What they did is they forced everybody with a Google account to have a Google+ account. In terms of real active users, it's probably, although we don't have the exact figures, more like 250 million. Still a big number. There are over 300 million in LinkedIn. There are over 300 million using Twitter. Instagram has gone from nothing to over 400 million users. So what you're thinking as a startup, or what you're thinking as a business is, if I launch something and I get it out to all of these people, surely if I can just get 0.1% of them to buy something from me, I'm going to be a billionaire. But that's not how it works. Because frankly, who cares about all of those platforms? If your customer is not actually using that platform, which could be the case, who cares how many users they've got? Who cares about that 0.1%? It's not going to work out for you. The key thing is that active users don't matter. Where does your audience live? That's what matters. That's what is the real key thing here, is where are your customers? So what's interesting about marketing technology is that people like this myth that if we go after all of the big mountains where we're housing the gold that is the customer, We can actually get 0.1% to convert to us, we can get rich, we can make lots of money. And in fact, if you look at the investment, $25 billion alone has gone into the investment in the mountains, in the place where the customers live, in where that gold is sitting. And in fact, that's well over 50% of all marketing technology investment. You'll understand how ridiculous that is, that only a few companies have over half the investment when I show you how big marketing technology is later. So what about the shovels? Well, in the gold rush, continuing the gold analogy for a minute, in the gold rush in California, it was the people who made the shovels that made all the money, not the people who were digging out the gold. So where are all the tools? And what about the shovels that are there to get to those customers? Well, the problem with marketing technology at the moment is it hasn't crossed the chasm. There are lots of solutions out there. And when I did my State of Marketing Technology report first time around, we looked at market penetration of all of the marketing technology tools that were out there. And in fact, across the Fortune 500, across all the big companies, marketing technology is prevalent. And that's because they have the money to buy all the latest tools to see if it'll give them a competitive advantage. Across the Fortune 30 million, however, in other words, all of the businesses, they haven't started using marketing technology yet. In fact, penetration was under 5%. So we've got a long way to go before marketing technology becomes prevalent. In fact, most companies are running their marketing, if they have a marketing department at all, using Post-it notes and Excel spreadsheets and maybe a wall planner on the wall. Also, there are warning signs for vendors, because I found in my studies that around 40% of companies actually build their own solutions rather than buying anything in the first place. So there may be a lot of marketing technology tools out there, but there's also a lot of people just building their own thing, using APIs. What's good for the vendors is that there are a lot of people also, in fact over 40%, who will use beta and completely fresh products, products that are under 6 months old, in a production environment. That didn't used to be the case. When I was very much younger and had naturally brown hair, the thing to do was buy something from someone who had been around for at least 3.5 years. You'd actually put that in your request for information or your request for proposal. Now, you can be a brand new startup, less than 6 months old, and you can be in someone's production environment. So that's a nice thing for startups now. And marketing technology is growing. When I first started analyzing marketing technology space, there were maybe 1,100 products on my radar. Now, there are a huge amount of products on the marketing technology landscape, and that's only 17 months later after I started. So let's talk about the shiny new object number 1. Social media, and I'm going to talk about the long tail. Not this long tail, although I do really like that long tail. I always like to try and slip a little cat picture into all of my presentations, so it's just my thing. If you follow me on social media, you'll see lots of cats, especially mine. I'm not talking about that long tail, I'm talking about this long tail. I did a study with Social Flow where we looked at millions upon millions of social media messages across all of the platforms. And one of the things that we found, which was really quite interesting, is that less than 1% of all social media messages get any kind of real engagement whatsoever. Now, that might shock you and might upset you if you're thinking that social media is going to be your real big boost and it's going to be your main reason for getting business. Less than 1% get any real engagement. I have to say the numbers on here are massive. In terms of real engagement, I'm talking about the things that go incredibly viral. So the good news for people is don't despair. Even doing moderately well in social media can pay off for most businesses, because under that 99%, that's actually still a lot of people seeing your message. But in order to look at it from a viral perspective, less than 1% actually ever manage it. So that's why you mustn't hook yourself onto social media, although I am fully aware that I will be followed by someone from Twitter. I just want to reiterate, I absolutely love Twitter, but don't put all of your eggs in the social media basket, because it's great for a lot of things. It's great for demand generation. It's incredible for customer service. In fact, KLM make $25 million in revenue just from their social media alone. That's 150 social media representatives generating $25 million in revenue annually, and that's revenue that they are getting because they are retaining revenue, keeping customers who were unhappy, but they're quickly responding to them, typically less than 30 minutes. And they're also getting lots of repeat business. So, I don't know anyone in this room who would not want 150 people to generate 25 million in revenue. That's a pretty good revenue per employee. And that's all from social media, so don't despair. And which platforms do people use? Well, overall, it's Facebook and Twitter. Those are the main platforms, a bit of LinkedIn, a smattering of all of the others. LinkedIn and Google Plus actually still is reasonably up there. The reason why companies are using Google Plus still, even though the press, VentureBeat included, are announcing the death knell of Google Plus all the time, is because if you put your posts out on Google Plus, it actually does help in some way with your search engine optimization. And salespeople like to use LinkedIn, social media for less than an hour mostly, or just one to. Marketers like to spread their day around. They will spend hours upon hours upon hours in social media. And in terms of platforms, salespeople love LinkedIn, of course, whereas marketers like to spread around Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And in terms of social media usage, will it increase? Well, absolutely. Everybody loves social media, so everyone's going to spend more money on social media. This will continue into 2016. I'll be updating these figures for next year as well. There is a lot of money being spent in social media, and that's an indication that it's working for people. So again, don't despair. Let's look at shiny object number 2, apps. Everybody is telling everyone to go and get an app. Get an app for this, get an app for that, get an app for every reason possible. In fact, there are 500 apps launched per day on iOS alone. And of course, iOS is only on 15% of all of the world's smartphones. The rest of them are mostly Android, of course. And on Android, on the Play Store, there are over 500 apps per day being launched. So how on earth do you compete when there are 500 apps per day being launched? And also, apps, well, that doesn't just mean business apps, the things that you might be super interested in this room. It means games, too. And in fact, the majority of apps that are launched are games. The ones that really succeed are things like casual games, like Mr. Jump. In fact, at one point this year, there were 9 consecutive months where the top 8 out of 10 apps were casual games like this. In other words, mobile is a normal marketplace. The winners win big. In fact, 95% of people are losers. The losers lose big. Only 5% of apps ever make it. So be wary. If you're going to launch an app, you have to make sure that you do everything to promote that app, to do application store optimization, which we've got a study coming up on later this year. You are going to have to think about how you acquire those users, what methods you use, what companies you get involved in that. Fortunately, I know someone that's got rather a lot of studies in that space, which is great news. And in terms of how you get out there, things like freemium pricing models, things like interstitials, even though they might annoy you and me, people like them and they actually work. Things like video ads and things like banner ads, they actually work. There are other things that don't work particularly well, like affiliate and e-commerce platforms, subscriptions, lock screen ads, and those other things. It pays to know what works well in apps, just in case you can leverage that. And this is the current marketing technology universe. In fact, this is our edited version, which has around 1,200 companies on it. But I have to tell you that now, the situation is that there are over 2,600 products on my radar in marketing technology alone in all of these different categories in terms of mobile marketing, email marketing, marketing management, analytics. It's really quite a mind-blowing thing. In fact, these are effectively shiny new objects, number 3 to number 2,600. So I want you to be more like an owl. Owls are known for looking at things very, very carefully before they make a decision. Owls are mythologically known for being wise, and they are linked to prosperity. So let's talk about that. What's the one thing that you should care about as a marketer or as a business owner? It's return on investment. If you spend one of anything, any kind of currency you can name, you want to make sure that that 1 turns into 1.01 or more every single time without fail. That's basically the definition of business. So I did some studies. I looked at the total cost of ownership and the return on investment of all of marketing technology, every single category that makes sense, that it's important. I started out by looking at all of the base salaries. In this case, I used data from the United States, and I used US dollar values. I looked at salaries for different levels of staff in marketing and sales roles. I then looked at all of the different types of marketing technology and who uses it. Is it used by an intern? Is it used by a manager? Is it used by a director? Is it used by the CEO or the C-level people on the board? And what percentage of those time is used? I looked at average session, how long it takes to use this product. I look at the time between sessions. I looked at, therefore, how many hours per year people use in these products, what the average expense was per year, and the perceived expense, just so that we got a gauge of whether people understand how expensive these things are to use. The big offenders were CRM systems and email marketing solutions. Email marketing is incredibly expensive, and the reason it's expensive is because it takes a lot of time to get it absolutely right and make it work properly. CRM is expensive because you've got lots of salespeople using it and you pay them a lot of money. In fact, CRM, it's quite interesting. We looked at all of the different CRMs and looked at which ones cost the most money to run and what kind of return you can get on those. In fact, what was interesting about the return is that only one CRM solution, Act, made a loss. Every other CRM solution made a return on investment. And if you stack those numbers up, you can see that actually a significant return on investment versus the investment itself. In some cases, 200%. So that really blows out the myth that was put around from the old Butler Group analysis from several years ago, where they said, and this is very interesting, that 70% of all CRM installations fail. What's interesting about that figure is that nobody ever said that. The Butler Group report that it came from was actually a myth. In a press conference before the Butler Group launched their big study, the analyst said to a journalist that he felt that 70% of CRM installations fail. It wasn't in his report. It didn't actually get reported. He just felt that. The journalist ran with it, and it's been something we've perpetuated for years. And the reason we've perpetuated this myth is because consultants love this figure. They tell you that 70% of CRM installations fail, but if you hire me, you'll be one of the 30%. Actually, the truth is that less than 5% actually fail if you study enough people. If you study enough people, enough installations, CRM, in fact, 18 out of over 3,000 respondents failed to get a return on their investment. In fact, less than 5% across all marketing technology fails to get a return on investment. And the reason for that is because we are all remarkably good at choosing the size of marketing technology product that fits our business, and they all work, and they give you a return on investment if you use them effectively and properly. So let's talk about some of those strategies briefly. The things that really work, the things that gave the best return on investment. Let's talk about conversion rate optimization. A/B split testing. Traty A/B split tested all of these logos. The one with the really ridiculous piece of clip art in it gave them a 300% return on investment, so they went with it. And A/B split testing in my studies is 2 times more important than any other conversion rate optimization result. A/B split testing is twice as important as anything else to all of the 3,000 conversion rate optimization tool users I surveyed versus all of the other techniques you could possibly imagine. Multivariate testing, very important. That's where we put lots of elements on the page in random formats, and then the software works out which combination of elements is performing best. In this case, it's the middle one that's performing best with 20% conversion. So then we stick with that, and then we run another test another time. Multivariate testing produces an average 230% return on investment. And again, that's across over 3,000 tool users. Analytics is incredibly important. If we can't measure what we're doing, how do we know where we're going next? How can we set a hypothesis of what might not be working? How can we run tests? How can we work out whether our A version and our B version is best? Analytics is amazing, and of course, it's pretty much free, because Google Analytics use within the last 3 years has grown another 9.9%, now at 59% of all business websites using Google Analytics. Funnel analysis is not free, but it is cheap. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to work out which of the combinations of offers are actually getting all the way through all the stages of your funnel and working out which one wins. In this case, it's combination C that is winning, and therefore that's the one we will stick with. Funnel analysis is cheap. It's easy to do. It's all about the data. It tells you what's winning and what's losing. User and expert testing and feedback is free or cheap, and it allows you to get feedback from both experts who really know their stuff and users who will tell you what they like and what they don't like. Now, I'm a fan of being marketing-led. I'm also a fan of innovation, so don't go down the route of being completely marketing-led and doing everything based on what your customers tell you to do. Do that a lot of the time, but leave 10 or 15% for innovation, for creating the things they didn't know they needed before you came to the table with them. So why conversion rate optimization? Well, because it's like me giving you a briefcase of free money. I'm not going to do that today because I'm not rich. But I'll tell you why it does that. Free money because CRO tools are either free or cheap to use. They're incredibly cost effective. But what's really interesting about them is that it costs me a lot of money to get from 200,000 visitors to my website every month to 400,000 visitors to my website every month. But it's almost free or cheap to get from 10% conversion of those visitors to 20% conversion of those visitors. So why increase my traffic when I can increase my conversion? And if you double your conversion rate, you're halving your cost of customer acquisition. So therefore, CRO is free money, it's cheap, it's easy to do, and my studies show that it has incredibly high return on investment. There are lots of CRO products out there in lots of different spots. So you have to look at the marketplace, but it's really interesting to see that most of them fit within the A/B split testing, multivariate testing space, or the analytics space, or the user and expert feedback space. And in terms of spend, well, most of them are less than $100 a month. But don't let that deter you. 64.4% of the people we studied who are in the small to medium business bracket are actually spending $500 per month or more on CRO tools. Why are they doing that? Because it works. In fact, it works to the tune of 223% average ROI across 3,000 tool users, and 5% of those were getting over 1,000% return on investment. And that's exciting about marketing technology. We'll also talk about email very briefly. Email is really still the highest return on investment channel that you can get. It might not be a shiny new object, but it's incredibly effective. And to that point, people are either spending the same or more, that's the gray and yellow bars, on email marketing next year than they are this year. And that's because it works. The biggest challenges, of course, are things like list growth and maintaining that accuracy of the list. But with an average return on investment of 246%, email marketing cannot be ignored, and you absolutely have to take it seriously. So, in summary, marketing, it's a bit of a whitewater raft ride, so get used to it. Get into the data. Make sure that you have an attention to the data. Don't be a magpie going after all the shiny new objects. Create a buzz. Use social media for that. Don't worry about where all the big customers are, the billions in the platforms, because that doesn't matter. Figure out where your customers are. They might be in a niche social network that only has 1,000 users. Go back one slide, thank you. It's growing, but care about the return on investment. Care absolutely 100% about that. Be an owl, look at the data, use your analytics, get the free bag of money from CRO tools, and if you've been counting, you'll have noticed that I've hidden 6 magpies in the presentation. And that's because in the poem it says, 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, and 6 for gold. That's the customers. Use marketing technology. Make sure you go to insight.venturebeat.com to get all the latest reports and studies, and have a great day. Thank you very much.